consciously heard the name of Sri Aurobindo in April 1969. I believe it was April 23rd, but I've never been able to check that. But it was a Sunday afternoon in April 1969. And I would say I was at the nadir of my life. I'd been a seeker of sorts since my teens. I was trying to find a way to do something meaningful with my life and my energies, and I knew the world ought to be a better place than it is. And I was here for the revolution. But by April 1969, whatever it was that I thought I could do or where I was going, it was clear that this was not it. And there didn't seem to be anything else. It was just a big black hole. I'd opened the I Ching, and it said, "It's advisable to meet a great man." And it only intensified my despair, because I thought, there aren't any great men anymore. So anyway, this particular Sunday afternoon, my partner and I dropped in on a friend who lived in Earl's Court, basement flat in Earl's Court, and were absolutely astonished to find the place completely packed with people, and a talk was going on. We'd missed the beginning of the talk, so it wasn't clear to me what or who the talk was about, and the fellow who was speaking had a very, very strong German accent. But during the next hour or so, I had the most amazing experience. I can't remember his words at all, but I can remember this experience. He kept mentioning things, and it was like a room inside my head. Things I'd been interested in, things I'd explored, things I thought were important. They were all rooms inside my head. And as he was talking, the doors of all the rooms opened and everything fitted together, and it all made sense, and there was a way forward. Light. Yes, that's it. So at the end of the talk, I rushed up to the man and I said, "Who was that? Who were you talking about?" Sri Aurobindo. Never heard of him. How is it possible? Here I am, I've heard of everybody, I've read everything, I've been everywhere. Never heard of him. So anyway, from that moment on, I was very, very interested in Sri Aurobindo. And fortunately, that person who was speaking that night, his name was Jobst Mueling, was somebody who'd been in the ashram in the 50s. And he'd spent several years putting together a compilation from all the then available published sources of whatever Sri Aurobindo and Mother had to say about the psychology of integral yoga. And he was actually in London looking for a publisher for that book. And the gentleman sitting next to him was dear Dick Batstone of the Sri Aurobindo Centre. So Jobst was in London for, I think, about 6 months. And during that time, he came to that flat 2 or 3 evenings a week and read out of his book. And an assembled company of perhaps 15, 20 young people. And I mean, for me, it was just, I was just soaking it all up like a sponge. It was the water of life. And he started giving me little books. He had an amazing collection of books with him. Nalini Kanta Gupta, that's where I first read about the yoga of Sri Aurobindo. No? There's one especially about education. And Practical Guide to Integral Yoga. And I was working. I was a working woman in those days. I used to get on the tube and go to my work near the British Museum. I was in the Library Association. And there was a nice conference room upstairs that was deserted in the lunch hour. I used to sit up there and read the practical guide, and there was a tiny photograph, the Cartier-Bresson photograph of Mother and Sri Aurobindo in the front of the book. And one day I was going home on the tube and I was reading The Basis of Yoga. And that one of those letters in The Basis of Yoga, probably I could find it if I looked. Suddenly I knew why I had been born. I said, yes, that's it.
Okay, I'm sorry. You keep going.
That's what I've come for. That's what
I've
been unconsciously trying to do that all my life. Yeah. That's it. So I didn't go home. Instead, I rushed to where Jobst was staying, and I told him this is what has happened. So he said, well, if that's the case, then take the Synthesis of Yoga as your Bible. So, but in those days, you couldn't buy Sri Aurobindo's books in London. So we had to write to Carlo Schuller in Zurich to send the Synthesis of Yoga and maybe some other things, I don't remember. But along with the book, he sent a photograph of Mother, recent photograph, 68 photograph, I suppose, and information about Auroville. Even Jobst was excited. Yeah. But I must say I'd been traveling for many years, and I was not eager to set off for India or anything. I was just happy to have the Synthesis of Yoga, and I was devouring it and letters on yoga and thinking, well, this is it. This is all I've got to do. But my partner, Ron, whom you met, I believe, he said, oh, that's it. For years we've been trying to find a place outside England to live because we can't stand the climate and we can't stand anything about it. That sounds like the right place for us. So Jobst said, well, you have to have your photographs taken and you send them to Mother in a letter. So we had our photographs taken in one of those little machines. Jobst said, you're sending that to Mother? But anyway, that's what we sent, and a letter that we want to come and live in Auroville. And we got the message back that yes, she's accepted us. But not yet. Things are not ready. 69, autumn 69. So we wrote back again, and are you going to tell us, or do we have to write again, or what? So then we got a letter back from the society that we can let you know, but also you're allowed to write again if you want to. There was a change in our lives. With some friends who were also connected, we went to live in the country, started a little crafts cooperative or something like that. Made muesli, that was one of the things that we did, with organic grains. And one day in, I suppose it must have been September or October 1970, we went to a farm in North Wales where they sold organic grains. And on the way back, we passed through the tiny little town of Flint, and there was an India festival going on in the town hall. So we stepped inside, and there were all the smells and the music. And we'd been twice in India before. That's another whole story. And so it wasn't me. I was not the one who said, it's really time to go to India. And they all started planning their journey and how it would all happen. And I said, well, I don't know. Haven't got anything from Mother yet. So we were in that state when one day a postcard arrived from Jobst, from Munich airport. I'm leaving for Auroville, hope to see you there. So that was kind of the green light I was waiting for. So I said, okay, Auroville. But I said, I'm not going overland again. I've done that enough times. So they put me on a plane. Actually, Jürgen Library Jürgen put me on a plane. Turboprop. to Bombay. And then I was familiar enough with India, I wasn't afraid to travel on the train, and I got to Pondicherry on my own and arrived at the bus station. You know, they just carry you, foreigner, they just take you to Bureau Central. And there I said, I'm looking for Jobst Mühling. And they said, well, we don't know, but Pandit will know, MP Madhavji will know. So they took me inside the ashram. First time I stepped inside the ashram. Didn't know it was Samadhi. There was Madhavji just coming out of his room. And he welcomed me so nice. You know, you must imagine what I looked like. You remember me then. I had long dark hair and I had a miniskirt up to here. And I don't know whether I really looked like ashram material or not. But he was very, very sweet and welcoming. And he said, Jobst is in Auroville, and you can't just go to Auroville like that, but we can put you up at Parc au Charbon, and Auroville office is just across the road. If you go over there and tell them, they'll send a message and he'll come and meet you. So he arranged everything for me. And probably the next morning, Jobst arrived and took care of me and made me fill in the form and took me to Roger and did all that for me. So the day that I went to the mother, it was raining. It was November. It was November 19th, I believe. Pouring with rain, there was a power cut. But anyway, Roger was taking me to meet Mother at his time. I think it was 9 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't know I was supposed to take flowers to Mother. So at the last minute, somebody said, go to the flower room. And they gave me a bedraggled little bouquet that I felt ashamed of. And was guided, or maybe Roger, I must have met Roger, and he guided me up and put me onto Mother's staircase, along with a lot of other people who were sitting, you know, one on each step, waiting to go in. And he kind of disappeared. But after some time, they called my name, and I was shown into the room. So I don't remember anything about the room. I don't remember Roger being there or anybody else being there. Mother sitting with her back to us, you know, as you come in by the door. And somebody must have told me what to do. Go, kneel down, let Mother look into your eyes. I don't know. Handed over my flowers. And I tried to be open. I wanted her to. Actually, when I first heard I'm going to see Mother, I thought, oh, well, I'll tell her my whole story and she will tell me what to do. No. And then they said, no, we don't speak to Mother. So I thought, well, I know who she is. I just let her see who I am, the whole story. I kept it all in my consciousness. And then after some time she gave me a rose. And I understood now this is the time when you get up and you go out. And I kind of drifted down the stairs. And Roger came running after me. That was a very special moment with Roger. Unforgettable moment. No? That's the real relationship. We come from Mother's room. And he said, Mother says yes. So Jobst was waiting for me downstairs. He took me to Andreda. Andreda said yes. He said, it's pouring with rain. I don't know whether the transport will come, but go across the road, ask for Henry Bell. If there's a transport, you can go. So after some time, the old Citroën appeared, Jean-Claude, I think, driving. And we went up the canyon, arrived at Aspiration lunchtime. And there's Norman Thomas emerging just in his bathers, you know. I'm the secretary. We're expecting you. You're number 54. So, lunch in the cafeteria. At some point, probably after lunch, but in that first hour or so, I met Rod. That was quite a shattering experience also. So there I was. Jobst's hut had fallen down while he'd been away in Bondi. No, I don't go into all those things. So 6 years I was with the school. The school was my life, absolutely. But of course I remember meeting you at that time, coming out to Four Comers. My sister arrived August 15th, 71. But anyway, school was my life. But how did it happen? I didn't stay the whole time in Aspiration. I lived in the Tibetan pavilion, of course, the Tibetan boarding. I looked after them. So I didn't have a hut in Aspiration. And I'd just left there, left the Tibetans, Rod and Anita in charge of the Tibetans. I'd just left there. I was camping in Sanskrit school in a room next to Shanti's office. And Frederick came to meet me. I knew who he was, but I didn't really know him very well. But I think a couple of weeks earlier, we'd been in some village action, what was it called? Tamil Fund meeting. For some reason, probably I was there representing education or something. And he said, there's something very important that we have to do for Auroville. Shamsunda knows all about it, but it's important that for the time being Navajat doesn't know about it. I was very impressed with you in that meeting, and I want to invite you to be part of this group. So I was part of the, what were we, trustees of the Auroville Society or something like that. But, strange thing, why was I in Kishorilal's office? I was in Kishorilal's room, not his office, his living room. I was there, chatting with the family when Rude and Tuan arrived and gave this news about the Auroville Society, and I saw how shattered he was. I think only then I began to, or even he was telling the story of Auroville to somebody I had with him, and he was telling how it's all Navajata's dream and he has started it and all the rest of it. And I was thinking, it can't be like that, it can't be like that. No? But it was. Funny moment. Anyway, then there was this whole series of public meetings and all the rest of it. And I remember one moment under the banyan tree, people saw me as a kind of spokesperson. I was often called upon to read or to speak or to say something. I remember one moment under the banyan, people sitting there, and I said that I'd come to the conclusion that we should stop all this discussing and reasoning and all the rest of it. And could we perhaps just from our hearts do what Nolini had asked us to do and go back to status quo? Could we just follow Nolini as representative of the wisdom of Mother and Sri Aurobindo? And actually there was quite a positive resonance all around the circle. There were 3 people over here I saw they will never accept it. And it made me suddenly weak. And I think that was really the end of my active participation. It was Pashi, Homi, and Indra. No, Indra couldn't have been at one of those meetings. Anyway, whoever it was, that I saw, no, they will never accept it. And then I became weak. I don't know, attachment, whatever it was. So, whatever it was I was trying to do. And finally I came to the conclusion I have to resign. And I know when I did that, Frederick felt absolutely let down and betrayed. And we spoke about it once. So anyway, there I was out of that, and I just went on with school and my work. And I was going down to Pondi every day and working in Norman Dowsett's office on the translation of Mother's collected works. They were going to be reprinted for Mother's centenary, 78, and it had been decided that the translation needed revision, and there were 3 of us working on it. One was a French boy from the ashram, Pushan, and Mira Jyoti and myself. And I used to be in the school in the mornings, and then I would cycle down to Pondi and have lunch in the dining room, and then I went to Norman Dowsett's office, and we sat there the whole afternoon till evening and worked on Mother's works. And throughout whole 76 I was doing that. And I think that helped me a lot. All what was going on here, the confusion, all I could see it. I wasn't happy about it, but I had my focus. So when the school was not there anymore, I concentrated on the translation work. I was living in certitude at Thomas's house. And gradually a little school thing. I mean, Renata, she'd been with us in Aspiration School, and she felt she has to do something for the younger children. There was Niloro, Pooja, Orasan, Durgora, Orien, Aurelis. So she was doing with all these little ones. And finally she came to the point, I don't know which year it was, that she went back to Germany and she asked me if I would take over the group. So I did that for a while. It grew. Integrated families, boys wanted to join that. Some of them joined with a teacher. They had a teacher, they brought their own teacher and they came. And all this was happening in the ground floor of Thomas's house. And it was so getting a bit much. And Diane Hessinger gave us the kindergarten building. And then it expanded a lot and other people came and worked there. And when I was really a neutral, when I became really a neutral, they threw me out then.
How did that come about, that you became a neutral? I mean, from being a trustee of the Auroville Society and the spokesman for Auroville.
Well, you can see that already by resigning, I'd stepped out of that Auroville Society movement somewhat. And then all those dreadful things that happened in the school. Somebody came to me one day and they said, they're burning the library books. And I said, come on, all librarians have to dispose of waste books in one way or another. I didn't believe it. But then anyway, it was like that. It was really like that. I mean, not all of them were burnt. A lot of them went to Karke's house and now they're all in the ashram. But my father's own collection was there. So many people had donated. There was an American fellow with a Hawaiian wife, Don. He donated a most amazing collection of beautiful art books. We had really a beautiful collection. So what madness was that? It was very clearly madness. And so I wasn't identified with all that, but we were living out of the way a bit. At that Auroville Society time, when we were actually having negotiations with Nava and so on, I was living at Hope. And I had Tashi and Orokal living with me. And one day, because of one of those meetings, I was late getting back to them. And Orokal said to me, Shraddhavan, I beg of you, please don't go to any more meetings. So I more or less stopped going to meetings after that. How did I get drawn back into it? Well, I think it was the business of Thomas and the carpenters being excluded from Matrimandir. Definitely it was that. And how did that come about? That came about because of the terrible attack on Piero. There was a psychopath wandering around and getting hold of people and beating them up. No? But when it came to Piero and Gloria somehow blamed it on Shamsundar, on Shamsundar's readiness to compromise about the funding of Matrimandir. You remember that whole story? So as a result of that, when Thomas came back, he'd been in Germany or something. Piero had asked the Matrimandia carpenters, they were all Aurovillians, while he was in hospital to make sure that his house was safe. And he was extremely distressed and sorry when they said, we've got so much work at Matrimandia, we would get another carpenter and we'll instruct him, we'll come pass every day and supervise, but we can't do the work ourselves. And it came out that Shamsundar had somehow encouraged them to take this stand. So then again it was just the devil. And everybody was mad in those days. We were all mad, you know. So shall I say something about that from my heart? How could all that happen? In the agenda there's a talk of Mother where she tells Saprem that if I have to leave now, the world will go through a very, very difficult time. And she'd also been told, that I know that your work will succeed, but I'm going to delay it as much as possible. The hostiles. So when she was no longer there physically to hold everything together, of course all these forces of division came in. And it wasn't only political. Couples who'd been together for decades split up. People who were friends became enemies. You know, every possible kind of division came in. But the main thing was to destroy Auroville. And to do that, what a wonderful ploy. You create a division and then you convince each side that the others are the Asuras. And I'm really very, very grateful that at some point in that whole process, I saw that it's not the people. These were all people who I knew from my soul. So it's not the people, it's the division. And when you have a wound, it's very painful, It's jaggedy, and if you press on it, it's more and more painful. So there's something which is keeping that wound open and keeping us apart. Even those rules that you're not allowed to talk to them or anything, no communication. They're the devil, which was not lacking amongst our group either. Same view. These are not mother's children. These are not my brothers and sisters. At a certain point, I really felt, no, the enemy is division. And it's very important for me not to give in to that. I have to keep holding everybody in my heart somehow. What a blessing.
Everybody was caught up in the madness.
I remember I hatched a plot. Now I'll tell this for the first time. It was absolutely clear at a certain point that at Matrimandia, who's behind all this? Divakar. We'll get hold of Divakar and we'll tie him up in the forest and then we'll go and talk to everybody else. I hatched a plot like that.
Oh, beautiful.
Crowbars.
I see you now.
Fortunately, there were saner voices. Yeah? Anyway. And I told myself, if in the ashram, those people who've been at mother's feet for 40 years, if they can't give a solution, then what do they expect from we idiots? We are just here for, what do we know? And I remembered how everybody really, at the beginning even of that Auroville Society movement, there was really such an aspiration to do the right thing, the true thing. Everybody wanted to know what is Mother's will. And that's why there was such a rush to follow Saprim, because he seemed to be the only one in the ashram who somehow could understand the aspirations and the feelings. And I regret to say, I think he led everybody up the garden path. He couldn't help it. He wasn't the guru, he wasn't the mother, he had his own problems. So whatever great qualities he may have had, it was a disaster. But you can't blame anybody for that. You can't blame Saprim. For a long time I blamed Saprim. But then I saw, no, actually, he couldn't help it either.
None of us could.
So what a miracle that we've come through. Isn't that a proof, of the power and the grace? Somehow, with a lot of casualties, I have to say, I regret very, very much all the casualties, but somehow Auroville has come through, and the opportunity is still open. We still haven't found out how to really take advantage of it, but it's still open. What a grace.
In Auroville today, I mean, when you speak to anyone one-on-one, you're speaking to a very beautiful person. Everybody has aspects of it. But still, after 40 years, when we get together collectively, we seem to descend to the lowest common denominator. So I'm asking, what is it? How do you see us getting beyond this? How do you see us? Because we're sort of like stuck in a rut almost when we come together collectively. It's the same people.
Maybe we should stop trying to come together collectively. I mean, we should stop trying to make decisions collectively. Even in the days of the Portus meeting, right? Of course it's going back to my old anarchist days, but everybody should feel free to share their perceptions, their knowledge, their perceptions. It should all be out on the table, and we should all be able to listen attentively, take it in, digest it, and then we have to touch our deepest self and say, what have I got to do now? And each of us act individually. And that way we vote with our feet, and what is supposed to happen, happens. But of course we're coming into a new stage of development. With Kittu we are reading in, now we're in Foundations, but we were in the Ideal of Human Unity, Human Cycle. And it's very clear if it becomes a larger entity with more people, then there has to be more centralization, there has to be more group discipline, so on. But, I'm not happy. I'm not happy about the way that's happening. Because it's too much driven by outer circumstances and not enough by, the clear inner vision of each one knowing what they have to do. And of course I comfort myself and I say it over and over again, Auroville can't be true Auroville, until there are enough true Aurovillians. And to be a true Aurovillian, the first necessity is to know who you really are and to be in contact with that what should become the active center of our life in Auroville.
But Shraddhavan, do you really think that the 2,000 people that are living here have that aspiration?
2,000 doesn't matter. How many are there? How many people have you interviewed? There must be 50 who've been here, who come with that. And if these 50 people all manage to find out who they really are and live from there, it'll be enough. It'll be enough. And meanwhile, what I think this place represents, Matrimandir is the soul of Auroville. I think what Savitri Bhavan represents is the aspiring mind of Auroville, the mind of Auroville opening to the light. And I'm quite encouraged, because it's the intelligent will and the deep heart center. Sri Aurobindo says these are the two grappling hooks by which the divine seizes on our nature. So, and yes, if we can't. We have to go on living the way we can live. Can't help that.
But do you have an image, or do you think you had an image of how you feel or felt that Auroville should be?
Yes.
And that Auroville's not living up to that image? Or?
Yes, but I think the image that we had, or that I had in the early days, it was quite simplistic. And I don't regret, actually from quite early on, I don't regret that Auroville has its feet on the ground and that it's not 6 inches off, And I don't regret the enrichment, the complexity. I don't regret any of all that, except because it makes it a little bit more difficult to concentrate. But that's the work of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. It's exactly that, to accept the complexity and try to turn all of it as far as possible towards the light.
Allow me to take you back a little bit. November 17th, 1973. I mean, I don't know what you were listening to, but I know I was being told that Mother was working on transformation of the cells. And after my contacts with her, I was just assuming that that's what was going to happen. And I believed that Auroville was going to be transformed. I was going to be transformed within a 20-year period. I had no doubts about this. So when I was told that Mother was ill and not seeing people, I didn't see it as a major event. But then when I was told...
She's gone. What a shock, huh? I was in London. Our Judith and our father had died in October 73, so we went back to England. We were with our mother, and on 17th of November we were travelling back to India. We left where we were. We had to get to London, and for some reason it was just ghastly. I mean, the connections didn't work, the trains didn't come, the weather was awful. It took hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And finally we arrived frozen at Bell Street. And there was a group of people there expecting us, and they asked me to read from Savitri. I don't know who asked me to read. Somebody asked me to read. And I just opened the book, and it was the Adoration of the Divine Mother. And I read part of the canto. And then there was a very nice English lady who was a kind of godmother to all of us young Aurobindonians. She took me and Judith back to her very comfortable flat and gave us supper, and we were to leave from there in the early morning. And she said, "You didn't finish reading the canto. Would you?" And I had just opened the book, And the phone rang, and it was the news that Mother had gone. So I can remember that I told myself, Sri Aurobindo's always told you that you don't rely on the outer contact, it's the inner contact which is important, and definitely nothing has changed in the inner contact. That was one thing I held on to first. And then in the plane, it was an Air India plane, and it was full of non-resident Indians returning for the holidays, I suppose. And they were somehow so tainted by Europe. It was quite a painful thing. I sat in the plane and I thought, Mother was with us for 94 years, and now she's gone, and so many people didn't even know. And how grateful I am that I did have that contact. And we arrived back in Auroville, and it was deserted because everybody was at Samadhi for the interment, but still I was so exhausted from the journey I couldn't just continue in the car. I stayed in aspiration, very, very quiet. Nolini issued a message, you remember? That her body belonged to the old creation, and I wasn't quite satisfied with this message. And I thought, really, she was working so hard for the transformation. And she was carrying all of us in her physical aura. And we didn't at all care how difficult we made it for her. And I thought about myself while I was at my mother's home in England. I took up smoking again, drank, you know. I wasn't thinking about the effect that was having, making things more difficult for Mother. So what I felt was, we just made it too difficult. No? And if we want her to come back, we have a lot of work to do. And we better get on with it.
Let's stop right there. That's beautiful. Yes, so we better get on with it. It's true.